Hello everybody and welcome to Sin City Living. My name is Jason. I'll be bringing you today's episode. As always, please hit the like and subscribe buttons. We have a ton of content coming out for you guys every single week. We don't want you to miss a thing. Our usual shout out of appreciation to our patrons. All those tips and support are highly appreciated. It's only going to go towards making the channel better. We're hoping to add a lot more games to the channel, such as roulette, video keno, video poker, carnival games, things along those lines. We just want to do it right. It's going to be very expensive, so it's going to take some time. You could help us out if you wanted to. If not, no big deal. We appreciate you guys just tuning in. But if you're curious about it, go ahead and check the description down below this video on the patronage. And for our patrons, we do hope you are appreciating those patron-only exclusive videos we're putting out for you guys every single week. If you have anything you'd like to see, just email us on the site. We're more than happy to film it for you. As for the rest of you, please continue tuning in. We have, like I said, a ton of content coming out. And if you have any suggestions, questions, strategies, anything related to craps, baccarat, blackjack, pai gow, casinos, Vegas in general, just go ahead and shoot us an email at sincityliving@gmail.com. We absolutely love to shoot these videos for you guys. It is our favorite thing to do. That being said, I'm going to go ahead and jump into today's video. So for today's episode on History of Vegas, we're not so much going to go into the history of Vegas or something historical that occurred within Vegas. We're going to go into the history of something that is very much featured within Vegas. We want to talk about the history of craps, the game of craps. And while I would love to be able to go into the whole history of how it was created and then grew up, nobody knows. Nobody actually knows where craps really started or was invented.
There's a lot of speculation.
There's always a ton of guesswork, and there's probably about 10 countries out there that all claim to be the originators of craps. But again, there's no way to know, not to mention it likely, I mean, it wasn't called craps. We can look back and find the first identifiable game that is mostly like craps went under a different name. It was called hazard. But it probably goes back much further than that. I mean, dice is simple. I mean, even before they were able to carve dice, they probably just used funny shaped rocks. I mean, there's probably been a ton of games. I mean, I've played drinking games with dice. I mean, anything that you could roll to give a somewhat random thing probably became a game, and then it just moved on from there. And it's been around for so long. There's really no way to know. Hazard itself can be identified back there, but it is thought that it originated obviously thousands of years ago. During the time of the Roman Empire, something that their soldiers would play, and this, by the way, is going to come into play a little bit later as well, but something that their soldiers would play, and it was carved, those dice were carved out of animal bones, which is where you get most of the phrases of, shake the bones, roll the bones, who's on the bones, but calling the dice bones.
I'm sure you remember that.
No, we carved them out of wood.
Ah,
yeah.
Not quite 1,000 years.
Right. Yeah, we had to use little chips of wood to carve the little chips of rock to carve the bone. So they were called they were carved out of animal bones, likely knuckle bones, which is another reason why a common phrase for dice is knuckle bones, and. That seems to be the foundation of craps. Nobody knows what the rules of it were. Nobody knows if there were even numbers on it. There could have been numbers. I, V, and VI. There could have been numbers, but there's been a lot of games throughout history that had things very similar to dice that had pictures. Mm-hmm. Pictures, basically hieroglyphics in a way. So who knows? Nobody knows what the rules were, so on and so forth. But a few centuries later, hazard was invented. Hazard came around in the Old English Europe and was usually played by the elites, the aristocrats, basically the hoity-toity people. They probably shook the dice with their little pinky finger out, and the T finger, and
gotta keep it fancy.
Fancy finger out.
When in doubt, pinky out.
And it was a pretty complicated game, even more complicated than craps itself. There is a lot of evidence that shows this game may have even been around in the 14th century, so quite some time ago. I'm pretty sure I've dealt to a couple people that played it back then. But it gained most of its popularity in the 1800s. That's when it
Possibly
really
the one who
started to
recently
go.
retired.
Yeah, actually, no, yeah. I actually worked with somebody who was probably a boxman for Hazard back in the 14th century. Now, as it gained popularity in the 1700s and 1800s, that's when it started to get more well known. Now, a lot of the rules on it are very, very similar for Hazard to craps. For instance, players would lose on a 2, 3, or 12, which nowadays are called the crap numbers. Whether or not they were called that back then, who knows? Unlikely, because again, the game wasn't called craps. A roll of a 7 or 11 would be a win. And those rules now apply to craps, and it's pass line bet, at least on a come out roll. Back then, just 2, 3, 12 was a loss, 7, 11 was a win, period. That's because it wasn't this real complex thing with going with, big felt layout and all these different bets. Now, eventually, likely early 1800s, 18 teens, the game eventually found its way to America, in North America, primarily in the French Quarter. That's where this game really started to get introduced in the United States, which makes a lot of sense because the French Quarter in Louisiana and New Orleans had a lot of people coming over from Europe. And in fact, roulette also came out right around that time period. European roulette came to the U.S. at almost the exact same time period and has morphed into American roulette. And Hazard came around that time and has morphed into craps. I do find it interesting, though, that with American roulette, it changed from European roulette. Now it seems like some of the rules almost sort of are changing back. Like it's starting
Somewhat.
European roulette's starting to get a little bit more.
It is starting to become.
SR is European roulette, basically, right?
That's exactly what it is.
So that's starting to become a big thing.
It is, but it's more of a high roller thing at this point. It's not universally played.
Although I've also heard there's some casinos that are starting to add a 000 to roulette.
Yeah, well, the 000 is the third one is, from what I've seen, just by examples in some of the dealer groups that I'm in, it's just their casino emblem. They're simple.
So basically, that's just like the 6-5 blackjack and paying double on 12s and stuff like that. Just the casino, just adding another little bit of house edge to it.
Oh yeah, because roulette's not already terrible odds.
Right. So, so these games get introduced, including Hazard, into the U.S., and things start to change right around then. Now, it's suspected that a man named Bernard de Mandeville is the one who changed it from Hazard into the game of craps that we know today. Even the name possibly came from a nickname for the game of Hazard that was a French word meaning craps. Not too sure exactly the etymology of that, but from there, as the game started to catch on from the French Quarter of Louisiana and New Orleans, it spread. It started spreading throughout the United States. Now, players eventually started exploiting the game. They found breaks in the game with the wagering systems and using fixed dice and a wagering system. They found a way to basically break the game. Nowadays, craps is basically mathematically perfect. You cannot guarantee a win playing craps unless you cheat. If you play it by the rules, pure fairness, dice hitting off the back wall, so on and so forth, it is absolutely impossible to not have a disadvantage versus the house. But back then, people had figured it out. They figured out how to use fixed dice and a specific wagering system in order to defeat the game. Now, a big part of this cheat was solved by a man named John H. Wynn, W-I-N-N, when he evolved the game. He added more things to the game. Basically, he simplified it very, very easily. He added the don't pass line. By adding the don't pass line, it then gave the players the ability to bet the opposite side of the game, of the table, without sacrificing any house edge to the casino. And by doing that, the idea of the fixed dice just kind of became obsolete, because at this point now there is no particular number that's what you're shooting for that's guaranteed to win, because it depends which side of the table you're betting on. And the game slowly, gradually gained more popularity. but it didn't really catch on huge until World War II. So I said we were going to connect back with those Roman soldiers. Well, the Roman soldiers played dice, played their little knuckle bones as a form of entertainment while they're stuck out there in the trenches. Well, in World War II, those European trenches were wet, they were cold, they were muddy, they were dirty, and things like, say, I don't know, cards weren't going to be able to survive that. Not to mention, cards are very easy to bend, and I was in the Army.
And
we
lose.
almost always had a deck of cards out in the field, and I can promise you that just about every single one of them was marked in some way, shape, or form. Not deliberately, but because they all ended up with bends and creases, because you got a lot of equipment on you, and
Moisture,
and so on and so forth.
stains.
Plus things, and especially back then where they didn't have, the plastic cards and stuff like that. So dice was the thing. Dice was, one, small. Something small that you could keep just tucked into a pouch somewhere, whereas a deck of cards takes up an entire pouch. A couple of dice, something very, very small that you can keep tucked away. It's tough. The dice aren't going to easily get bent or broken and things along those lines, and it's a very simple game. So that's what a lot of the soldiers would play. Well, as World War II is winding down and soldiers are coming home, when they want to go out gambling, well, they've been playing dice now for years in some cases. So the game of craps really started catching on, and at one point it was the most popular casino game in the world, actually, which I find very surprising, but definitely within the United States, all the way up to about the 80s and 90s. And then it was supplanted by basically simplicity. It was
Mindless
supplanted by
button pushing.
mindless simplicity.
Or
Video poker and slot machines, electronic slot machines. Those are now the top dogs as far as gambling goes.
good old one-armed bandits.
Because they're simple. People don't have to understand rules. I mean, you don't play a lot of slots, but every so often I'm sure you play a slot here or there. And how many times have you had like a payout going and you're looking at the screen
You'd
going,
be like,
I have
I
no
haven't-
idea what I just hit.
That's why I only play keno, because I understand what's going on. Either my numbers hit or they don't.
Pretty basic, which is basically craps too. Either your number hits or it doesn't. But yeah, that's when it really started to get supplanted. And what I have noticed now, I mean, even now I would not consider it the number 2 casino game. I mean, I don't know if there's any statistics anywhere on it, but I mean, I would say blackjack.
Or poker.
Or possibly poker. Although I don't really consider poker
With
a casino
the-
game because they're playing against other people.
Well, with the emergence of the World Series of Poker, everybody sees themselves as being the next.
They all think they're the next great poker player.
Right.
And craps is just an extremely complex game, and that's one thing I've noticed just with today's attention span, especially in America, just with today's attention span and low math abilities of most people. I think that's another reason why craps has kind of fallen out of favor. It's still wildly popular and extremely busy everywhere you go, but you go to a busy casino, a huge resort casino, they might have 6 to 8 craps tables, whereas they have about 30 blackjack tables and or 60, 70 table games outside of craps, because it's not the biggest anymore. And again, I think there's a lot of factors to that, but that is the history of craps as best as anybody knows it. One interesting fact I've read about craps, though, because I was curious when I first went to dealing school. I used to think, not something I was really planning on doing, but something I thought would be kind of cool to do was when I finished dealing school, I thought, well, wouldn't it be cool to deal for a year or so, get some experience, and get my passport, and then travel around, go deal for a year in like Macau, or go deal for a year like an Australian casino, or 6 months,
Or London casino.
London casino and stuff like that.
South
So I was
African
like,
casino somewhere.
and I actually had a student that told me that was their plan. Considering their abilities as they were learning, I guarantee it never happened. But
Was it someone I encountered?
no.
Oh.
But I thought that it would be kind of interesting. So I did some research into American dealers going to these foreign markets, and actually, no, you don't want to be an American dealer dealing in Macau. That's for sure.
Absolutely not.
Australia, actually, you could be pretty popular because you've got to them, you've got the cool accent. But craps itself, even if they happen to have craps, it's dead. It just stands dead. Even a Macau casino that has craps might have one table and they almost never deal it. So yeah, it's definitely an American phenomenon right now,
Right
for
now,
sure.
yeah.
So that is the history of craps.
I got nothing to add, baby. We'll see you later.
Good talk. Let's do it again sometime. Thank
Bye.
you for watching.